Jerry Varnell, 23-year-old with a history of mental illness, arrested over the weekend. He's accused of attempting to bomb a downtown Oklahoma City bank. Joining us here in the Oklahoman's video studio for some legal context is Sanford Coates from Crowe and Dunlevy. Great to see you again, sir. Thank you for your time.
Thanks for having me back.
He is a litigator, as I mentioned, with Crowe and Dunlevy here in the Oklahoma City office, former U.S. attorney. You've read the 17-page criminal complaint. Your initial thoughts?
My thoughts are that this was a long investigation that the FBI and the U.S. Attorney's Office carefully considered, that they've expended lots of resources in investigating this case, and identified someone that wanted to do harm to others for a cause that he believed in, that he apparently had some interest in the Oklahoma City bombing and the bomb that Timothy McVeigh and others had put together, wanted to replicate that, and that got to the point where literally, at least in his mind, they made a bomb and put it in a van and parked it next to a target, and went all the way to the extent that he thought he was detonating a device that would cause an explosion and significant damage in downtown Oklahoma City.
I want to ask you a little bit more about that with the device he thought he was exploding, because that'll get into something in a second. You have a unique experience of both sides of this, prosecuting and defense. But before we get into that, you mentioned the Oklahoma City bombing. Do you think that'll be brought up during this case? It seems obvious, but maybe not.
Yeah. I don't think it'll be part of the evidence of the case. I think it'll be in people's minds as it goes forward. It depends. It's clear from the affidavit supporting the complaint that there are recorded conversations that were made by the individual who reported this and an FBI undercover agent, and whether they talk about that in their recordings is a little bit unclear. I would think there's probably some of that, and so if Mr. Varnell exercises his right to a trial and a trial occurs and these recordings are played to the jury, that certainly would be something that the jury would hear. Could be the defense tries to keep some of that out for try not to inflame the jury. You're going to have a jury here, most likely from Western Oklahoma, so that's going to be fresh on people's minds, and I don't think, again, it will be an issue in the case in the sense of that'll be something that the prosecution tries to prove, but the facts of that and circumstances might come out at a trial.
I should mention that Mr. Jerry Varnell has pleaded not guilty. His next court appearance is Tuesday for a preliminary hearing. As NPR would say, make us smart. How is a case like this prosecuted? Well,
so the investigation to date is capsulized in an affidavit. It's 17 pages long. There's a lot more to it, I'm sure. They can't put everything in an affidavit like this. This is a complaint that's there's been a probable cause determination by a United States magistrate that a crime has been committed. Doesn't mean that a crime has been committed. It means that the government's shown, at least convinced the magistrate, that there's probable cause. As you said, there's a preliminary hearing scheduled for next week. Unless a grand jury indicts Mr. Varnell between now and then, there'll be a preliminary hearing, and at that hearing,
Gotcha.
The government will put on evidence, will likely just submit the affidavit, add any other information that they may have gleaned since then, and then Mr. Varnell's defense attorney will have an opportunity to cross-examine whatever witness the government puts on. The judge then will make another determination of probable cause, whether probable cause exists that a crime's been committed. If so, which I think would be likely, then it would go to a grand jury. So this is going to go to a grand jury one way or the other, whether it's before the preliminary hearing or after. The grand jury will hear it. It's made up of 23 citizens of the Western District of Oklahoma. They'll make a determination, again, same standard, probable cause, as to whether Mr. Varnell's committed a federal crime. If so, he'll be formally indicted and arraigned, and a trial date will be set. With information of this magnitude and the number of recordings and probably other information, it's going to take the defense some time to sift through all that, prepare a defense, So I would think a court would give defense counsel at least north of 6 months to prepare for a trial. Now, in federal cases, more than 90% end up in a plea. So I think that's I'm not predicting what's going to happen here. This gentleman might be innocent. I want to make that clear. But he'll have counsel. They'll evaluate the evidence, and they'll determine whether he wants to exercise his right to a trial or try to come to some resolution with the government.
Got you. My colleague Josh Delaney on the print side of things asked you before we got started here, how strong is the Fed's case? How strong is the Fed's case from what you know?
Well, again, just knowing what's been disclosed or published in the affidavit, I think it's a rather strong case. Again, it sounds like that there were multiple meetings, multiple recordings of those meetings, whether that was someone wore a wire or there's some sort of recording device. Nothing improper about that. That's law enforcement techniques. The defense may challenge some of those, and they have every right to. But I can tell you as a prosecutor that when I was a prosecutor that a defendant's own words were the best evidence that you could have. So I don't know what these recordings say, but I assume they are him outlining what he wants to do, agreeing that he wants to detonate a bomb, that potentially determining what target, what building he wanted to target, and those sorts of things. Juries, I think, really hone in on, and they are really impactful for juries to hear a defendant's own words about what they want to do. The other thing I think that's notable from the affidavit is apparently and allegedly Mr. Varnell wrote a lengthy statement that he intended to be a Facebook post for after the bomb went off. So I think there's a strong case. Usually these things come down to intent, cases like this, and I think this affidavit outlines the government's case for intent to detonate this device.
We're talking about that 17-page criminal complaint. You can find that on newsok.com. Read it if you like as well. Let's talk about the defense side of things. Cade Varnell, which we believe is Jerry Varnell's brother, wrote, "My brother's a schizophrenic and the FBI brought him the van loaded with explosives. Good job, America." Will mental illness, health play into this case?
It certainly appears so, and it's very common in cases like this where I think almost certainly, if the charges are formally brought by a grand jury, that there'll be some sort of mental evaluation given what appears to be this individual's history and some statements that have been made. So there'll be an evaluation, whether a couple of things. One is whether he's able to prepare and participate in his defense. Is he at a level,
right,
or does he have a capacity to help participate in his defense? The other would be, did he have the mental capacity to form the intent to do what he's been charged with? And those are complicated issues. There'll be, I would think, evaluations, most likely, of his mental capacity. And I can tell you that, a lot of, it does happen in real life, but a lot of dramas have the, not guilty by reason of insanity. I can tell you in federal court that's very difficult to prove, and it's the defendant's burden to prove it by clear and convincing evidence that that's a defense. And it happens, but it's extremely rare. And the other is commonly is known as a diminished capacity, and that generally doesn't go to the ability to form the intent. That would go to at the punishment stage. So if he's either pleads guilty or is found guilty, that would be something I think that the defense would likely present to a judge in a sentencing phase to say, look, this individual suffered from X, Y, and Z, had diminished capacity, and his punishment should be reduced accordingly.
Chatting with Sanford Coates. He's with Crow and Dunleavy here in Oklahoma City, a former U.S. attorney. One final question for you. FBI tactics and entrapment. That word may come up. Is this a case of entrapment?
I'm not going to opine as to whether it is or isn't. I would think that would be something certainly that the defense counsel will look at.
And perhaps that's the better ways to phrase that question. If you're on the defense side of things, would you bring up entrapment as a topic?
I would certainly look at it very, very closely. It appears that, again, I've just read what's been publicly available, but it appears that Mr. Varnell had these tendencies potentially, but the actual substances that he thought were ammonium nitrate, for example, or blast caps, were provided by the FBI. This is common. I think this happens, has happened before, will happen again. I don't know of a court that's found that an investigation using these tactics was improper or that this was entrapment. There was a case a few years ago out of Dallas where an individual, the FBI was working very similarly, provided what he thought was a bomb, and it was planted in a downtown Dallas office building, and a phone was used, he thought, to detonate it. And that individual pled guilty and was sentenced to north of 20 years in federal prison. So that's a long way around the barn to say, yes, as a defense lawyer, I think entrapment and mental health would be two strong things I would consider in defending Mr. Varnell. Whether they'll be successful or not is hard to determine, and that'll be up to a federal judge to determine where that comes out.
Fair enough. You can find more coverage in the Oklahoman and online at newsok.com. As I mentioned, colleague Josh Delaney is working on an angle of this. Brianna Bailey, Meg Wingerter is as well. Sanford Coates with Crow and Dunleavy here in Oklahoma City. We always appreciate your time and your expertise.
You're very welcome.
Thank you, sir.